To Comics Keys, where we look to go a little bit deeper and look beyond the hype. Joining me today, I've got Sunil. Hello, Sunil.
Hiya.
Thanks for. So, just wanted to start off by asking you how you got into comics in the first place and why.
So, I can tell you exactly. This is how I got into it. This exact copy of Superman 23, November 1988. I bought this from the comic shop. Well, I was going to say the comic shop. It wasn't a comic shop at all. I bought this from the newsagent at the top of Watford High Street. And to be honest, I probably don't even really know why. I think I'd seen a Superman movie on the TV years before.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I had 50 pence. I was going to say 75. I had 50 pence in my pocket, and this caught my eye in Finley's newsagents. And I bought this, and then very quickly was hooked. Very quickly. This is 88. So I was 8 years old. And very quickly I was hooked. And I had a very good friend who lived around the corner from my house. And he also had bought a couple of comics from the same newsagent. And we started trading them with each other. And then we had a few other friends who got involved and dropped out of it and came back and dropped out of it. But from there, from 88 till about 93, 94, I was completely in. Like, all that I cared about was big American movies, Super Nintendo, comics, maybe a little bit of manga. And that was it. And then I found girls, and then it all went to pieces. But for 6 years, between 1988 and 1994, I was properly in it. Properly in it. And then I took a massive hiatus. I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I stopped buying comics in sort of slightly disillusioned, actually. That was probably the fault of Death of Superman. Like, it would have been like 92, 93. After that, I sort of lost a bit of love for it. I stopped collecting, carried on with my life, sort of always interested in like the movies and the iconography and everything, but then stopped until that same friend, Andy, was turning 40, and he'd carried on collecting. So I used to like catch up with him every so often, and he would show me like amazing stuff he'd bought, and he was still like in it a little bit, not as heavily. And I did a whole bunch of research because I wanted to buy him a 40th birthday gift. And I was like, right, I don't remember anything from 25 years ago, because it was like from 14 to 39.
Wow, that is a
25-year gap. I just had to teach myself everything again. And of course, when I left, I'd never heard words like restored. I'd never heard words like trimmed. And of course, well before CGC, like in my head, things were very much still a double letter grade, with near mint being the highest possible grade. And I did a bunch of research, and then I found, I don't actually, to be honest, I don't know whether it was actually a good deal now that I look back at it, but I bought him a Thor 337 9.8. No, 9.6, not 9.8. 9.6, signed by Stan, Walt Simonson, and Louise Simonson. And it is cool. It's a really, really nice book. But in doing all that research, I fell off the bandwagon and I was back in. And then before I knew it, I was at a mart. And it was the first time, because like when I stopped collecting, I was like 13, 14 years old. And it was pocket money, right? It was before I had a job.
Yeah.
So it was absolute pocket money directly given to me by my mum and dad. So the most you could ever spend, most I think I'd ever spend on a comic was probably about 15 quid.
Okay.
Maybe more. Not much more. And then I found myself at the MCM Comic Mart, the big like expo one, as a guest of someone. I hadn't planned to go. And then I found myself in front of a comic dealer. I can't remember who it was now. But I just realized that I now had a debit card and it was my money. I could buy whatever I wanted, within reason, of course. So I bought a Captain America 100 for myself, like a raw copy. And then it went nuts from there.
Was that your first big book then?
Yeah, it was. So in that time, in that 25 years, I moved to London, I moved to San Francisco, I moved back from San Francisco. And then when I was moving back, and around about that same time, I was searching for a comic for Andy. I mentioned to my mum, I said, oh, I'm going to buy Andy this comic. And she was like, oh, does he not want any of the ones you've got upstairs? What? What do you mean? She was like, all your comics when you were a kid are upstairs. I was like, no, they aren't, Mum. They're not. Because I remember selling my Spawn set to pay for my first flat share.
Right.
I sold my Spawn collection. And in my head, I sold my Spawn collection and all my McFarlane Spider-Mans. It turns out I didn't. And they were all still upstairs. So I had probably about 400 comics that I'd completely forgotten about, including 298 to 324 Amazing Spider-Man, which was a stroke of luck. and of the other like 375 issues that I haven't mentioned, there were 91 issues of the New Teen Titans, and then the rest of it was kind of dross, like just one book here, one book there, a lot of like bronze, not even bronze, a lot of sort of 90s Superman and X-Men books that were worth absolute pennies. Yeah. Half went to the Oxfam on the high street. About 20% went to some kids I know in the area who just were getting started. And then it left me this little bundle. And of that little bundle, I think probably very, very few of them exist left in my collection. But there's a few. There's a few in there that are still from that original collection back in the day. I was thinking, I can tell you for definite, because I've got the numbers in front of me, because I keep the numbers, 7. I've got 7 books from my original collection that are still here. That one will never go. And actually, I'll show you the other one that will never go, which is just here. This will never go because this was bought off the newsstand. It's actually going to be quite hard to see it on this. But if you look faintly there, there's a Mark Bagley signature. Can you see it in the gold on his torso? Just about here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can see it now.
And it says 147 of 500. Mark Bagley signature. That's not him at all.
Okay.
It's not him at all. It was just a forgery of a 14-year-old boy. Just wrote it on there. And then swapped it for another kid for some trading cards. And then that kid didn't want the trading cards or the comic anymore. So I got it back. Absolute absolute forgery. So it's never going anywhere because it's not worth anything apart from to me. So this would have been, I turned 40, so it would have been 2018. So 2018, I came back to it. So I've been recollecting for about 4 years. And in that time, my collection has ballooned from about 400 up to a high point of 1100. And is now back down to under 500. And that's my aim, to stay under 500.
So are you trying to keep it to 500 sort of quality comics that you're aiming to have, or is it something else, or is there a reason for keeping it at that number?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a couple of things. One is storage. Like it's not easy to store a huge collection. When I see people like in the US who've got 10,000 books, like it's massive. Like, where do you keep 10,000 books? I don't even understand.
They're big though, aren't they?
They've got bigger houses. So one of it's that. The other thing for me is, where's the end? Because if you don't have any sort of parameters, if it was like, right, I'm going to own every Kirby book, cool. Well, that's thousands already. Like, you're already into a nightmare. And when I originally started collecting back, and I think this is probably part of what you wanted to talk about, was my original intention was to collect cool covers. And like, I had in my head like some iconic covers and things like that. And then after about 8 months of following that process, I realized that to some intents and purposes, all comic covers are cool. because that's the point of them. They're just a lure into buying the book. The front cover is aimed to sell you the book. So really, there are some that are better than others, but they're all supposedly cool covers. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got printed. So I got to a point where I had loads of series, loads of chaos, and I just said, you know what, clear it all out. And I focused everything on Marvel Silver Age books. And I sold all my modern books, and I sold all my bronze books. And I just absolutely focused on Silver Age Marvel books.
Is there a reason why you focused on Silver Age?
I think for me, they feel iconic. And I think it's also, for me, it's a little bit of a point in your life, because there were books that I grew up, like when I was growing up, the books that you would see that would be like, and this is like back in 93, 94, that were like the iconic books in my world. ASM 300 was there, but it was weirdly, it was New Mutants 87, the first Cable, not Deadpool, because no one knew Deadpool was going to be a thing then. And like, I don't know, Valiant gold editions and embossed covers and things like that. So when I came back to it, I bought some books that were in that era, and then I realized that the ones that I actually wanted were the ones that I felt were actually iconic to the movement. So that Silver Age of Marvel books to me is untouchable. Like, there are moments in there that are genuinely great art, genuinely great stories, and I just feel more emotional attachment to them, which is not in any way to sort of do down modern books. And I definitely hope that I'm never snippy about modern books, but it's just not for me. Like, I look at, there's a comic shop very near my house, Chaos City Comics, and I go in there probably 2 or 3 times a month, but there's nothing for me to buy, because it sells modern trade paperbacks and modern books off the shelf, and lovely people that run the shop, and I wish them well, but there's nothing for me in there. So occasionally I buy stuff for the kids, but like, I don't know, there's nothing for me in there, because I've made that decision for me. And the decision came 2 parts. I got rid of all the stuff, focused on silver, and then we had a sort of unfortunate event where the same guy, Andy, who I bought the Thor for, him and another friend, Duncan, they bought me for my 40th a year later, a Superman 21 from 1945. And my friend, that was my downfall, because I'd looked at these silver books and I was like, right, I'm going to buy all these Silver Age Marvel keys. And I've done pretty well. Like, I've got a number of them. I haven't got them all by any stretch of the imagination. I haven't got all the big books, even though even close. I'm missing loads of the big ones. But the Golden Age one was a nightmare, because then all of a sudden you start thinking about books you've never seen in the flesh. Because if you go to any of the big comic markets in the UK, Incognito or Comicana or some of those like big stores will have on the wall, here is a X-Men one. Here is a ASM 129. But when you are presented with something here, I had never ever seen that in my life, ever. And that all of a sudden in a Superman 9 from 1941, it's just wild. So then my collection, again, sort of evolving, went from Silver Age Marvel keys to Silver Age Marvel keys and Golden Age DC. And I bought a bunch of Wonder Woman, and I bought a bunch of early Batman and some Action Comics, Superman, Comic Cavalcade, World's Finest. And again, I just sort of found that it was sprawling again, and that I was getting into a nightmare. And the problem with that nightmare, of course, is those aren't cheap books. Those are £100, £200, £300 for a non-key raw book.
Yeah.
So very quickly, you're like, right, to collect World's Finest, bear in mind that some of those stories are garbage, but the covers are great. All of a sudden, you're talking about, wow, this is going to be $4 to $5 grand for 10 issues. So again, I made that decision. Stop. sold them all, sold the Batmans. I sold some beautiful Wonder Woman books, some absolutely beautiful Wonder Woman sensation books that I'll miss, but then refocused on the Superman books. And very recently, I was sort of pleased to get the final piece in the puzzle for me, because my intention was the 1940s. So from January 1940 to December 1949, which is Superman 4 to 61, to have them all, to have a run of Golden Age books, and I've done it. So along that way, I picked up 2 and 3. So I've got from autumn 1939 up to December 1940. Yeah, let me get that right. August 1939 all the way to December 1949, complete run of Superman books.
And is this what led you to be so involved on Instagram and social platforms? Was it in order for you to find books, find people who might have these rare books? Is this what, you know, got you to be more involved in that world, or were you already involved on those platforms?
Yeah, so I worked at Twitter from 2012 to 2016, and then I worked at Instagram from 2017 to 2021. So I've spent the last 10 years in social media and big tech, and like the community for me is as much part of collecting as owning the books. And I did a run through of that Superman run, and there's a couple of books in there that really stand out to me. The 21, which my friends bought me, but there's a 10 in there, which a guy in the US who I don't know him at all. He called me at 11 p.m. at night on Instagram, and he said, "Oh, listen, I'm at the Little Giant show. There's a Superman 10, and I've just looked at it on GPA, and I think it's under. Do you want me to buy it for you?" And I was like, "Well, like, I don't know, like, how much is it?" And he showed me the price, like on the book. Yeah. And he was like, "That's the price." I can't remember what it was, like $500 or something. And he was like, I'm going to haggle, so I think I'll get it for $450. And I was like, okay, but like, if he says no, I'll take it for $500. And I went to sleep. He texted me in the middle of the night, said, "I've got it for $425. Send me your address and I'll post it." I was like, sure. So I sent him the money, PayPal goods and services. He shipped the book. It arrived in New Hampshire 2 days later. And it's like one of the best books in my collection, because Ed saw it, thought of it, called me, said, "Do you want me to buy it?" Then haggled on my behalf, then posted it. So like, collecting's really different now than it was. If you and I had unlimited Amex cards, we could go and buy every single comic we wanted tonight. The internet has killed, to some extent, scarcity. To some extent. Yeah. Because we can, if you're willing to spend the money, you can go and get anything right now. So for me, the thrill now is a little bit in the bargain hunting, a little bit in the precision of a book. Because that's the thing that I think a lot of modern collectors are blinded on. How does a book look? Because I think people see the grade and they're like, "Oh, that's a 9.8, that's brilliant." Yeah. But actually, I think there's more subtlety to it. And the book that I haven't got one to show you. The one that I'm hunting at the moment, Tales of Suspense 39, the first Iron Man. And the reason this book is proving so hard to find, because if I wanted, I know where probably 7 or 8 copies are right now. You can go and buy them now. On the front cover, it says Iron Man. Actually, I've said this now. I'm now thinking, have I got one to hand? I think I might have a reprint to hand. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Yes, I had that one exactly to hand. If you look where it says Iron Man there, yeah, it's got 2 quotation marks on either side of Iron Man. Okay. The vast, vast majority have got 1 on the right-hand side or none at all from where it's been trimmed. Yeah. Trying to find one with a double quotation mark is incredibly hard. So that's become a little bit of a mission for me as the collecting goes forward, is to like, how do you find more specific books? My Captain America collection, just 17 books, but trying to get them all in 9.0 white pages or better. And that's become really hard because I've got some in like quite good grades, but they're cream to off-white or off-white to white. So just tried to find that needle in a haystack of a very specific book in a very specific grade. Has like added to the fun for me.
No, that's very cool. I mean, to set those goals, are you like that in other things as well? Like, do you set kind of lots of goals in various other things, or is it a sort of a collecting type approach?
Yeah, I don't think I've got this in anything else. So, you know, my job is I sell NFTs, and I don't have that same energy for that. Like well, that's my day job, but I don't lie awake at night thinking about what's my plan to a Bored Ape, in the way that I do ponder during the day as I'm making a cup of tea. How many books would I need to sell to get an FF1? and what order would I sell them in? Yeah. So no, I don't think it is. I think the goal for me has always been a little bit chopping and changing. The Superman run has been really fun because it's given me a bit of focus. And now the current focus is a complete run of 1 to 101 Fantastic Four, which is the end of the Kirby era, the complete superhero Strange Tales and Tales to Astonish. Those are the 3 that I'm working on now. They're going to be slow. And actually, one of the nice things that I'm enjoying with these is I'm not bothered about the grade. I'm not going to spend $200 on a filler issue because it's graded at a 7. I'm happy to spend $50 or 30 quid on a much lower grade one in a 3 or a 4 raw, ideally, because I don't want to take up loads of space. So that's the new aim, is just to find, I want to get to a point where I go, all the Strange Tales superheroes, Tales to Astonish, and I've already got all the Tales of Suspense, bar 39. And I feel like that would be a nice run. It will make sense to have those sort of issues up to the big premiere issues is kind of where I'm heading.
That's cool. I mean, in terms of the investment side, are you sometimes worried about the prices that investing so much money in these books? I mean, if you look at the market in the last, let's say two years, it's been absolutely crazy. The ups and the downs. Are you concerned sometimes when you spend a large amount of money on a book that you might lose half its value, or it might, you might be in a situation where it's not such a great investment as you might have thought? Yeah.
So I should preface this by saying that this is just my take. And like, I'm definitely not offering financial advice to anyone. But my take on it is, first and foremost, this is a hobby that's meant to be about enjoyment. So I have X amount of money plowed into the books, and it's not an inconsequential amount of money. I look at it in 2 factors. Like, one, have I had fun? Have I enjoyed it? Have I made friends? Have I enjoyed the experience? It's a little bit like the gambling, like when the fun stops, stop.
Yeah.
If at the end of this, I sell it all for £1 a book, I have to be able to look at myself in the face and say, listen, you spent X amount and you got 500 quid back. But did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy meeting people and, making your Instagram live that showed off your Superman collection? And like, yeah. And, meeting people like yourself, and there's a bunch of people that I've met in the groups, and, and hopefully this doesn't sound over the top, but when I went to WonderCon in Anaheim, I met like 9 or 10 people on the show floor who recognized me from Instagram. And like, that was cool. Like, nice. Just to be able to be like, actually, like, I made friends internationally. Like, Rob, who I've bought some books from, the man behind the red hood, got me a pass for the show. I worked his stand a little bit. I hung out with Hiram and met a bunch of dealers out there that I've bought books from previously. And for me, there's a lot in there about like, have you had the fun? Next piece, I had a good conversation with someone recently about if I bundled together all my books, sold them all, I could buy a Superman 1. And the question was, why don't you do it? Why don't you just sell the lot and just have a Superman 1 or a low-grade Batman 1? And my answer, without even thinking about it, was, that's a bad financial move. Because then I've got one asset. And if I lose my job or I need money, I have to sell one asset, and I'm going to sell it at a loss if I need to sell it quickly. So for me, this is a little bit like a portfolio of spread betting. I have X amount of money in Fantastic Four. I have X amount of money in X-Men. I have some money in, Tales of Suspense. What I don't have is one AF-15 at 40 grand that if for some reason they cast the wrong Spider-Man and the book goes cold generationally, I'm left trying to sell it. Now, of course, you could say, but they're all one category. So if you're a big stock investor, you don't bet all your money on tech stock because you get into the bloodbath we're in at the moment. So there is a little element of risk there. What I have done over the past 4 years is I have bought books that I didn't need and then sold them at a profit. I don't think I would go as far to describe myself as a flipper. What I tend to do, and by the way, there's semantics here, and there's somebody watching this right now that'll be like, that's exactly what a flipper does. I tend to buy books that I like and that I would like to own. And then further down the line, I will reconsider that. Do I still want to own that book? And do I want to sell it? I think it's very rare that I would buy a book just because it's cheap. And actually, this has definitely been the case this year. When I have seen books cheap this year, I have paused and thought to myself, number one, is that person selling the book because times are a bit tough? And is it right to exploit someone when times are a bit tough? Secondly, there's a bunch of people out there who've been priced out of the game over the last year. So is it right to steal a bargain when there's somebody else that might want to get one? So I saw a UF4 9.6 recently, and I was really tempted to buy it. I was like, I know I'm going to sell that book again. I know it's not a book that will stick with me. So I just leave it and let somebody else grab it because there's somebody else who's been desperate for that book. Now, it probably went to a flipper who probably whacked it on eBay. But for me, morally, I've just got to that point where I'm like, I don't want to be out here stealing bargains from other people. Let me buy the books I want to buy. Let me buy a book that will add to my collection. And if further down the line, I decide I don't want it, then I'd like to sell it for a profit, ideally. But I try not to buy books where I think this is stone cold. Superman is a risk. Like Golden Age Superman is a bit of a risk because it's not a culturally relevant character anymore. You can't see the IP being rejuvenated. I mean, the TV show's been a relative hit. It won't really affect Golden Age books in the same way. So that one's a little bit of a banker of some of those books are 80 years old now. They'll be with me, those ones, until they turn 100. And then we'll see what happens. Because a 100-year-old book, especially when you start talking about you start talking about that, Superman 2, 1939. I mean, that's really the birth of superheroes. That time period, 38, 39 is like, that is very...
That's a keeper.
Yeah. And so I'm going to keep it until, until it reaches 100, and then we'll see what happens. And maybe there's a risk. Maybe it wouldn't, there's no market for physical goods anymore. There's no market for superheroes because the kids have grown up with it and they're bored of it. It's the thing their mum and dad made them watch. So there's a risk in it, definitely. There's definitely a risk in it. But across 500 books, I think I've got enough spread of things that people will always be fairly interested in. And that's kind of why I'm always slightly anxious about, buying a 9.8 Something is Killing the Children and hoping it keeps value, because you're banking on James Tynion continuing to write it and the IP having another life outside of just comic collectors. And it might do. I mean, that's a prime example.
For a Netflix show and
yeah, and it goes to the moon. Yeah. But that stuff worries me much more. I feel like that is much more trying to read the tea leaves than I think Black Panther will always be relevant. To a section of the audience, the first big black hero they saw on TV, they saw on cinema screens, will always be relevant, especially adding a Stan signature to it. Like, I think I'm confident in that can stay with me for a while, and there'll always be someone that's like, yeah, like, I will take that off your hands for it. And if I make a 10% loss or a 20% loss or a 30% loss, it's probably fine, because I think there'll be other books that I'll get a 10, 20, 30, 40% bump on.
Cool. And if you're starting today, if this was, the first day of collecting, you were looking into comics, and you had, say, £100 to spend, what would you do with £100?
I'm going to give a really old-fashioned answer, like really, really old-fashioned. And by the way, is this £100 to invest or £100 to collect?
Let's say invest.
Okay, if I had £100 to invest, which is an easier question, by the way, I would spend £35 on it, on the Overstreet Guide to Collecting Comics. Okay. And that's super, super old school. And everyone would be like, oh, boring. Honestly, I would buy it. And here's the reason I'd buy it. Number one, you don't know what information you're looking for. You haven't got a clue what information you're looking for. Buying that book enables you to have a couple of things. One, like reference guides. You can look things up and you can be like, right, if I look at all the amazing Spider-Mans, how much is it going to cost me to collect the entire run? And you can sit there with a pen and paper and you can work it out and go, actually, the mission for me to collect every showcase book is going to be really expensive. What if I bought all the Brave and the Bold issues instead? And you can make those comparisons much easier than people are like, oh, look at sold listings on eBay. What, for 400 issues? I'll be here a week. Are you crazy? And also I can look and go, oh, I'd like them in a fine grade or a near mint grade. On top of that, the Overstreet Guide has probably about 40 pages of industry reporting at the front of every volume, where the biggest dealers in the US, and there's always a couple in the UK as well, write a 500 to 1,000 word piece on what they're seeing trend-wise. Honestly, you can listen to Comic Tom all day, but Comic Tom has to produce a video every week. When you get into an annual report and you stop and you want to write something that all your peers look at, you put a bit of time and energy into that.
Yeah.
Plus, on top of that, every single one of those articles, there's a name, there's a website. So at the moment, what happens is you start collecting, you're like, let me check out what Forbidden Planet I've got in stock. Great, no problem with that. It's a nice place to start. But you want something particular? You want to shop around? You want to look at 50 places? Honestly, the Overstreet Guide, as outdated as it is conceptually, is the best foundation. Now, once you've got it, and you've done your research, and you've read it, and you've understood it, and you've looked it up, you've probably got £65 left to spend. With that £65, I would say point blank, buy silver. I think silver is more market safe than bronze or modern. You might not make the big leap. If you get you fluke a win on a modern book and you can sell it for a high value. But I think buying a decent grade Silver Age book and reading it and cherishing it and thinking what you want around it, I think is the important bit. I also think if you're not going to read it, and by the way, I haven't read every single comic I've got. I've read the majority in that big pile of reprints, and I've got a reprint for most of the slabs that I own. I think if you're not going to read it and you're not going to love the character, I think it's very hard to get momentum. I think it's very, very hard because then it becomes akin to stocks and shares. Do I want shares in X company or X company?
Yeah.
And I think it becomes quite quickly, it's easy to get dispassionate about it. And I see this all the time in the Facebook groups and on Instagram. You see someone come in hard, splashing money around. I'm going to buy every single first appearance. And then you see them fade away because all of a sudden they realize that they're going to drop $5K on the first Ant-Man. They don't give a fuck about it. They're not interested at all.
Have you seen more and more of this in the last, say, year or so?
Yeah. So because of, so I spend a lot of time buying from the US. I buy more from the US than the UK, which is not a preference because it's a pain in the backside because you've got to deal with shipping and international and transfer fees and everything. But I find very little after in the UK historically. And you do, when you get to the big auction houses, it's a different crowd. It is an investment crowd. If you look at who's the new challenger, Goldin, the guy's called Ken Goldin, Goldin. You look at their auction site, they've got 40 comics in their latest auction compared to 400 sports trading cards. The comics is like by the by, like it's a small, like, we're a sports trading card thing. Do you know what they've got in their next sale? The Detective Comics 27 4.0. Because they know who their audience is. And because they're able to look an investor in the face and say, a seller in the face and say, we've got people with massive wallets, not little wallets. And you can tell they've got massive wallets because when you sign up to Heritage Auctions, which is one of the biggest in the world, you sign up to Heritage, you log in with your PayPal. When you go to Comic Link, you set up an account, put in your Gmail address, your password, and your credit card details. Goldin, credit check. Before you can bid, credit check. I had to get my limit raised before I could bid. They were like, you've got 20K credit. I was like, what? It's more than my car. Why have I got 20K credit? I don't want to. I'm never going to spend that in my life. But that's how they work it. So yeah, there is more and more investors coming in. We're talking now in this point in 2022. Stock market's a mess. Global currencies are a mess. Crypto's volatile. NFTs are volatile. People like a physical possession. Same's happening in the wine market. Same's happening in classic instruments. I spoke to a venture capital firm today who are taking money from hugely rich people and investing it all into NFTs. They're buying Bored Apes and CryptoPunks because they think they're going to be market responsive. They think they'll get more return out of their Bored Ape at a 500K investment than they're going to get out of 500K in Netflix. Spoiler alert, they're right. For now. My view on it is find something you're passionate about, because if you're not passionate about it, then there's other ways to make money. There's better ways to make money. Buy a small flat and rent it out. I mean, not an easy thing to do, but like if you're worried about making $100 on every book you buy, you're not going to enjoy it. And you're going to price things badly, and people are going to call you an arsehole for pricing things badly.
Do you have a preference when you on the social platforms for buying? So do you prefer Facebook or Instagram or?
So I prefer, I'm 50-50. Facebook UK, Instagram US. Facebook in the US is absolutely the worst. It's full of the grimmest, most unpleasant, most horrible know-it-alls, misogynists, racists, scammers. Honestly, Facebook in the US, just wild. Whereas weirdly, Instagram in the US, unbelievable. Instagram in the US, still to this day, operates on PayPal friends and family.
Wow, okay.
Absolutely wild. If you try Facebook friends and family in Facebook in the UK or Facebook in the US, people will be like, no, absolutely not. No way. In the US, it is still the case. This is a double whammy.
Nice.
$5,675. PayPal, friends and family. Can you imagine? Like the entire journey through it, I was like, this is a disaster. Like everything about this move was incredibly badly planned. But that's the way it operates. And I've made some very, very good friends from Instagram in the US, and I've made some very good friends from Facebook in the UK. So I would say, in terms of learning and being part of a conversation and a discourse, Facebook is better because of the comments and because of the conversations that happen, especially in the UK. But in terms of buying, I see far more available on Instagram live sales than I see on any website anywhere.
And what about new platforms like Whatnot? Have you looked into those?
Yeah, so I met with I met with some of the team at Whatnot. Bizarrely, I'm an approved seller, even though it's not open in the UK. So I don't quite know how that's worked. I think the format's really good. I do see a lot of stuff go on there for too much money. I do see a lot of people that are blinded by that format and get caught up in a bidding war and go crazy trying to win something. And actually, you're not winning it, you're losing it. I've also seen a couple of reports of dealers who didn't get the money they wanted on a book cancelling the sale afterwards. So I think Whatnot's up for an interesting time because it's only as good as its sellers. So yeah, for me, I probably watch 2 or 3 hours worth of Instagram lives every week. Elite Comics, Hiram Collectibles, Superworld. If you've never seen Superworld, absolutely brilliant. Their live show is fully educational. They do Tuesdays and Thursdays. They don't go super fast. They take their time. They explain a book. They explain all the defects. They always price under market. Wonderful to deal with. But it's a proper education. It's glorious. Like I've seen books on there that I've never, ever seen anywhere else. And the biggest impulse buy I've ever made in my life when I bought a Hulk 1 from them on a whim.
And how does that work? Do they is it a bidding thing, or do you just buy it?
Claim. Yeah, it's claim. Actually, Superworld are interesting. They don't do offers. So they put the book up on the shelf at what they think is a good price. So say they put it up for $200 and they say it's $200, that's it. And at the end of the show, you're allowed to put in an offer for a book.
Okay.
You have to wait till the end of the show. The one that I watch most regularly, Elite Comics 11, theirs goes up. As soon as it goes up, you can put an offer in, but a claim trumps it. No auctions. Auctions are quite bad content because someone has to fill the gap of the auctioneer. So it becomes quite a draining process. So in terms of just a watch, I much prefer the claim sales. And the other one that I should shout out at this point is Golden Age Guru on Instagram, who is also educational. Like I watch that show and there's always Schomburg books or EC books, like proper Golden Age stuff that I just don't know that he's talking about. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen that. That is actually genuinely rare.
Yeah, that for me is the next thing. That kind of Golden Age stuff it's like another world.
It's a slippery slope, my friend.
It is, yeah.
I can't recommend it just because it's so hard. It's so hard. And the other thing that is really tough is there's no stock in the UK.
True.
Like if you want to go and buy Golden Age books in the UK, Comicana have got a few, Incognito have probably got a few, Silveracre have got a ton, but it's whether you can price it out of their hands. Because I've never had any history of buying anything successfully from Silveracre because it's not really their business model. So they don't really want to sell the big books. Their business model is we've got massive books, so you come and shop with us. We're not going to sell you the big ones. We'll sell you smaller ones. And the big books are there just because they can lure you in every day to come and look at the number of FF1s they've got. But you could buy number 200 for a tenner.
Yeah. Interesting business model.
But I mean, it works for them. They're hugely successful. And Daryl and his son Dan seem to do incredibly well and have the most wonderful collections themselves. I think Dan's sitting on like 10 or 12 copies of Daredevil 1. Like they've got unbelievable collections, but their business model is very much like, we will never sell a book on the cheap, and we're quite happy to bump a price if we need to bump a price. But good luck to them, because everyone's model should be different. If everyone had the same model, it would be boring. But yeah, the Golden Age stuff, like, I love it personally. I've definitely got my eye on a few single-digit Batman books. But for the moment, after finishing the Superman run, I'm back to Marvel Silver, Tales of Suspense next, and possibly an FF1 before the end of the year, possibly, depending if it doesn't go even worse than it is at the moment.
Yeah, well, that book's just, it's gone crazy.
Yeah.
Even really incredibly low grades FF1s are just ridiculous.
Yeah. I had one. I had a 2.5 for CBCS. And it was one of the pieces of advice I was going to give. If you can, and not everyone can do this, but if you are liquid enough that you've got money, I find a bundle deal is the best way to get a deal at the moment. So buying one book, someone looks at GPA and decides if they want to sell it to you or not. I bought this, and I really wanted this, and I could just feel there was no way I was getting a bargain on it. Like, there was no way. So because I'm fortunate, and I appreciate that I'm fortunate, and this is not the case for everyone else, they had a Hulk 181 in a 5.5. So I managed to bundle the two of them and get like $2,000 off.
Right, okay.
For the pair of them, because they knew, like, we're not going to find two buyers. So we found one buyer, one set of shipping, one transaction, one person to chase. So I bundled them, and it was on an Instagram live. It was from We Could Be Heroes. And I'd sold the Hulk 181 before they'd even shipped it. Because I was confident. I was confident that I could sell it in the UK. And it went really quickly. And I got the benefit of the discount for buying two books. And I got the benefit that I sold the Hulk one at the profit. So actually, my Giant Size X-Men #1 ended up being a very, very good buy before it went. Actually, it was when it was stone cold, when that book was like non-existently cold. So I do think that's, like, if I was thinking about like tips to give people, if you can, and like that's an extreme at high value. If you can, like, most dealers are more interested if you're going to buy a couple of books than one. So if you're haggling on one book, sometimes it's worth thinking, all right, actually, could I buy 2 or 3 and maybe move on the third one? Or, you know, maybe limit how much more I buy by squeezing all my transactions into one, so that you can feel the benefit of the purchase. Someone's always going to feel a bit more willing if you cross a digit threshold. If you go from, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds over the 100 mark, someone's like, oh, it's 100 pounds, let alone when you go from like, oof, I bought 2 £600 books. Can I get it to £1,000 rather than 1,200? They're much more likely than if you're like, can I get £100 off this £600 book? No. So if you can, it's not always easy, not always possible, but I think that's definitely like my top tips. Don't get stuck into FOMO. You can't have every book. I put up on Facebook my Superman run 2 to 61, 3 years in the making, the stuff of dreams for me. And 2 hours later, Antonia Hayward put up a photo of her Batman 1 8.5. And it was a little reminder from the gods. Yeah. Whatever you've got, mate, someone's got better. So I do think that's important. It's important to be humble with it. They're just in your care for a little while. Don't worry if someone's got a better book than you or a better grade, because someone has. My collection, which I think is like pretty solid, like I think I've got some great books, is nowhere near as good as Andrew Slater's or Nicky Williams in the UK and their Facebook groups. And it's nothing compared to the likes of, you know, the boy who had 7 or Ali from Elite Comics, or like any of these people. You've got AF-15s and Nerdy Girl with her Action 1 and her Captain America 1. Like, there are levels to this thing. Don't get stuck in the FOMO. Don't try and collect everything. Don't think every book is going to make you $100. buy stuff that you care about, because you'll have the best chance of making a return if you care about it and you understand it. And
as long as you don't care about 90s image comics.
Well, you say that, because I'm of that era. Have you seen the prices on a Spawn one now? They published millions of that book. A number one now, you won't get a number one for less than $50. That book should be pennies, should be worthless. Now, you ain't getting in money for a Youngblood Strike Force or a Cyber Force or Savage Dragon 12, but there's some of them that are. Yeah, but Image and Valiant books from the 90s. But then, you could probably buy them for a couple of quid. You can get yourself an Exo Man of War or a Solar Man of the Atom for a couple of quid and enjoy it. Have a read of it. Don't worry too much.
I was happy that you were into Bone. There aren't many people that I know who are into Bone. Exactly. It's just such a...
Have you seen Jeff Smith's 9-panel comic today?
No.
He's done it. Have a look on his Instagram or his Twitter. He's done a 9-panel homage to the Peanuts cartoon, all about his interaction with Netflix. And it's wonderful. It tells the story, because Jeff Smith's a master storyteller. It tells the story of, what are we talking about? 91, 30 years of heartbreak in 9 panels. It's wonderful. It's absolutely like, I don't believe in original, well, not as I believe, I don't believe in buying original art for me because I have limited space and it's just another thing. But if I could buy the original art of that, because it is a masterpiece in storytelling, have a look. I'll send you the link afterwards, and I'll pop it in the comments of the YouTube, because it's so good. It's so good. It's so wondrous just how he defines what he's been through with trying to make Bone happen.
Yeah. I was really looking forward to it. I thought it would actually happen, finally.
Yeah, I read an interesting thing, actually, that he said this time last year was that COVID had been really good for it, because a lot of the animators they wanted were tied up with other projects, and those projects had finished, and he'd been able to get the best animators and the best people for the show. And then it's just not to be, sadly. But maybe someday someone will get the rights and be able to do it properly, but not for the foreseeable.
We'll see. We'll see.
Well, because it's, I mean, from the looks of his tweets, Netflix still own it.
Did they?
Yeah, they've still got the rights to the animated. So it's just going to sit now in development hell for 5 years until that deal expires. And that's the pain, because you've got another 5 years and then you've got to revive it, because he can't go out and shop it until the rights are done.
This is the problem with speccing as well, because people spec a lot on stuff that is optioned, not realizing that optioning something could mean 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
You're going to wait around for your book to go nowhere for particular amount.
And that's and bear in mind that I'm not a big spec collector, and when I say not big, like not at all. Like, I don't think I've ever bought a book because I think it's going, like, especially a modern book, because I just don't know. I don't know it well enough. I don't know if Punchline is a big deal. I don't know if Null is a big deal, because I don't read those books. So, like, that thing about not enjoying it, there's no point in me buying a Riri Williams first book, because I don't know whether she's got life in her, because I don't know how good she is. Although I was reading America Chavez the other day. I do think she's great. I think she's very fun. The thing with that is, I'm always intrigued. Who is my market? Who do I think I'm going to be able to sell this book to? So if I am if I'm trying to think like whether I buy something. So if I buy that, I know every Silver Surfer fan wants one. Every Thor fan wants one. Every Silver Age Marvel fan wants one. And actually, dare I say it, it's such an iconic cover that there's no risk in it. This book is liquid. I can sell this book, no problem. if I'm sat here with a West Coast Avengers 45, I think that's the number, with the first White Vision on it, who's my market for it? Because I'm going to go out on a limb and say, there are no Vision fans. There are Marvel fans, and there are potentially MCU fans, and there are Avengers fans. Vision can't, I mean, apart from that one Tom King run, which was great, doesn't really hold together. There's not a whole ton of Vision fans out there. So the White Vision cover, great homage, so maybe people want the pair, but it's really based on WandaVision spec, which is a mediocre reception TV show. So who's my market? And the thing with a lot of those books is your market is just people who are later than you in the speculation game. And in that game of hot potato, who's the arseholes left holding it, being like, do you want my White Vision? Do you want my White Vision? Do you want it? And that book went from nothing to, you know, $700, $800, and is now back to $300. And by the time that you bring the White Vision into the show and you remember, actually not a great character, it'll be back down to 150 and then lower. Because I had this problem with in the FF books I was trying to buy. One of them is the Agatha Harkness book, which no one cared about. And when I was trying to buy it, it was while that show was on. And I was like, I need that one for the run. I'm not going to buy it. Not spending £500 on Fantastic Four 94. Absolutely not. There's no way. And I've waited and I've waited and I've waited. And now, stone cold, no talk of the TV show. Maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. Picked up at the Mart, VFN, 60 quid. And I honestly think that to me is probably better for me than speculating. It's just having the confidence to just be like, no, it's coming back down. It's coming back down. Although the FF1 is going to prove me wrong when I buy it right at the top of the market and then it falls.
Halves by the next month.
yeah, which I think is possible. I think it is absolutely possible that book gets to 25, 30K and then people buy it and then it dies a death. And we see it drop down to 18, 19, and there's people left with a 10 grand hole on it. I do think that book is a big risk, but I also think, again, every Marvel fan wants one. Fantastic Four fans want one. The MCU fans are going to want one. And anyone that is a collector of Silver Age is going to look at it and go, there's less of them than AF-15s. There's less of them than X-Men 1s. And the only one that's even close to it in terms of rarity is that. Like, that's a rare book. There's like maybe half compared to the AF-15. Now, I get Spider-Man's a bigger character and a more important character, and arguably, you know, the most important of those Marvel characters. But when you talk about scarcity and how easy it is to move a book, that book we could sell tonight. No problem. I can find a buyer for that book tonight and make a profit on it, which is absolutely not true of my House of Slaughter 1 to 5. It's not true of that. That's selling at a loss. I can guarantee it.
Oh, cheers, Sunil. It's been great. It's been great to finally chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to catch up some other time as well.
Yeah. I hope it was useful and people didn't think it was me just...
I think it was brilliant.
Just weighing it on. If you... sadly, my presentation is a little bit Bruce Lee. It's like water.